The forehand is one of the most critical shots in modern tennis, and in this special lesson, you'll learn how to transform yours into a consistent, confident weapon so you can dominate your matches. Let's take a deep dive together into what grip you should use, the best swing path for effortless power, and how to create huge topspin to keep it in play. Hey, my name is Ian, and over the last 16 years, I've helped more than 1 million tennis players improve through my videos, podcasts, and top-rated book on Amazon. Let's jump right in. The way you hold your racket on your forehand determines a lot about whether it's going to be easier for you to swing forwards or easier for you to swing upwards, and ideally we want a good balance of both. So here's all your different grip options for the forehand and which is easier and which is harder for each of those different choices. The continental grip was the gold standard on the forehand ground stroke many generations ago because it made it very easy to bring the racket straight back and then go straight through. That creates a lot of drive, but it makes it very difficult to come from below the ball and swing upwards and create a lot of topspin. The way you know if you have a continental grip is by taking the big knuckle on your index finger, this one right here, and then lining it up on the second bevel of the racket when your racket is on edge straight up and down. Here's John McEnroe getting ready to hit a forehand, and if we zoom in on his hand during his preparation, you can see that big knuckle of his index finger is not on the side of the racket, which is where an Eastern forehand grip would be, but a little bit more up towards the top in continental. Bottom line, just don't use this grip. It's super easy to drive the ball, and I mean, there's kind of some benefits here in simplicity and being able to just directly go through and hit the ball, but it's very, very difficult to make significant topspin, which is going to hamper your improvement when you start trying to attack and swing more aggressively. The next main grip type is Eastern forehand. Now, the big knuckle of your index finger has slid around towards the side a little bit, so part of the hand is starting to go underneath the handle, and that makes it a little bit easier to have a little bit more leverage to accelerate the racket in an upward direction to create topspin, which we'll talk more about in a second. Here's Roger Forehand. Here's Roger Forehand getting ready to hit a forehand, and you can see really clearly here the big knuckle of his index finger right along that flat side of the handle on bevel number 3. That's right dead in the middle of Eastern forehand. Eastern forehand gives a pretty nice balance between being able to swing through the ball for power and swing upwards past the back of the ball for spin. Move your index finger knuckle around one more full spot to bevel number 4, and now we have a semi-Western forehand grip. Now, a significant amount of the hand is starting to wrap around the bottom of the handle, which tilts things a little more aggressively in the direction of being able to swing upwards as opposed to forwards. Example of a player who uses a semi-Western forehand grip is Novak Djokovic. If we freeze here right around the point of contact and zoom in, you can see that his big knuckle is not on the flat side of the racket, which would be Eastern forehand, but instead his big knuckle is on the smaller angled part of the racket handle, just one more spot over. This is semi-Western. Your last main grip option is to bring your big knuckle of your index finger all the way around to the bottom of the handle, and now your hand is starting to actually wrap around the backside of the racket, leaving your palm almost completely under the handle, and now this is a full Western grip. Example of a former professional player that uses a full Western grip is Jack Sock. You can see the big knuckle of his index finger right here, right along the bottom edge of the handle. This is a full Western grip, which is really extreme, and yes, it sets up for a really aggressive upward swing to hit a lot of topspin, but it makes it very difficult to drive through naturally and produce a lot of penetration or power. Not only is the full Western grip super extreme and not very balanced, but Jack Sock now plays pickleball, and friends don't let friends play pickleball, so I don't recommend the full Western grip. If the insights on grips have already been helpful, it would really mean the world to me if you please click that like button. It helps support me and my videos. Thank you so much. Now let's dive into how to physically swing the racket to have incredible forehand results. A great forehand follows the same physics principles as a roller coaster. In fact, just watch these elite world-class players swing on their forehands, and I want you to try to pick out where might these rackets be moving and flowing and building in speed and momentum like a roller coaster does. Little personal side note, I'm absolutely terrified of roller coasters. A couple years ago, I took my teenage daughter down Splash Mountain, and I literally thought I was gonna die. It was terrifying. So if you wanna hit a terrifying forehand, you need to follow these same principles. So what we have here is a racket coaster. So up at the very top of the first hill, we have lots of potential energy that's stored because we have a high position and a long ways down to go. Then as the racket starts to come down the tracks, we start to build speed and momentum. And right about the bottom, we peak in our speed and momentum, and then that energy carries over and helps us get up to the top of the next hill. Whee! So with that illustration in mind, watch Carlos here, how the racket starts up high, then it starts to fall. Now, this is critically important. This downward drop of the racket, frequently, I see tennis players try to make this happen by swinging their arm. They see their favorite players create this reverse C motion, this circular path, and so they're like mechanically making the racket move through this motion. And it's critical to understand that all your favorite players on TV, this drop from the top part of the hill down towards the bottom part of the hill is passive, it's relaxed. It's allowing gravity to pull the arm and the racket down passively so that the arm can stay really fluid and loose. Then, as Carlos's racket gets close to the bottom, watch how the logo on his shirt starts to transition forwards just before he finishes the drop of the racket to the bottom of the roller coaster hill. What he's doing is seamlessly harnessing that energy that gravity has helped him create. As his racket falls, he's building speed and he's building acceleration with the racket. And then just before it reaches the bottom of that initial drop, his body activates and starts to unwind and turn forwards. And then he's able to harness that energy and momentum from that initial drop of the racket and slingshot it around forwards and upwards through the point of contact. That slingshot kind of effect is only possible if the arm and the hand and the shoulder are really loose and passive. If you watch your favorite players and you mimic their swing by trying to swing the racket with your arm, your muscles are going to contract, your arm is going to get really rigid and tight, and now your body might be turning and rotating the way that it needs to, but all of that power and energy from the biggest, strongest parts of your body won't be smoothly and efficiently delivered into the ball because your arm, the connection point between your body and the ball is really rigid and tight. This is why the best players at your local courts are able to hit such huge forehands without ever looking like they're trying super hard. They're harnessing the power of gravity in a circular path and then timing it just right with the rotation of their body with a loose, relaxed arm to slingshot a tremendous amount of acceleration powerfully upward and forward into the point of contact. This is one of the many reasons why the modern forehand is so much more powerful and dynamic than an old school forehand like Johnny Mac. When he gets ready to hit his forehand, the first direction his racket goes is downwards and backwards. So rather than start with the racket upwards, he's bringing his racket down to the bottom of a hill, bringing it upwards slightly, stopping the momentum and the energy of the racket right here, and then having to reactivate and engage it again in a forward direction towards the point of contact. And so he has a much shorter runway, whereas Alcaraz was starting up here, letting gravity drop the racket down and building speed and momentum, and then harnessing it into the point of contact. Johnny Mac is having to start from a much shorter runway and then try to build energy and speed over that shorter path. And this is why Johnny Mac's swing looks a lot more armed and tight. It's because compared to Alcaraz, because Alcaraz is building much more acceleration and harnessing a much smoother, more circular path to build speed bigger and bigger and bigger throughout the entire length of that path. If you want to continue learning, take a deep dive into how to hit your biggest, most powerful forehands ever, then go check out the free training at forehandpower.com, where I'll show you step-by-step how to add 15 miles per hour to your forehand in just 15 minutes of practice by following some super simple drills. It's absolutely free, and I guarantee you'll be hitting your biggest forehands ever. Just go to forehandpower.com. Now let's talk about how to add topspin to your forehand, because if you don't, then the harder and harder you hit the ball, the more and more errors you're going to make. Topspin is going to curve the ball back down into the court and keep your aggressive shots in play. And the first and most important thing to understand is that what grip you have doesn't make topspin. There seems to be this widespread misunderstanding that, well, if you just want more topspin, just shift your grip over to semi-western or just shift it over to full western and you'll instantly start making topspin. And that's absolutely false. I'm a good case study for this because I hit a semi-western forehand grip, but I've always struggled with hitting too flat and making too many errors because I don't have enough curve. The reason why for that is a combination of when I learned how to play tennis, which was back in the early 90s, I didn't learn an aggressive topspin swing. And also the last 20 years of time spent on the court has mostly been with students. And so I'm used to just hitting a neutral, straight shot towards my students. And when I play against opponents, I tend to lock right back into that same path, which leads to really inconsistent results. Please learn from my pain. I'm trying to help you avoid the same mistake. What does create topspin is the path the racket is traveling in at the instant the ball touches the strings. The ball is only on the strings for a couple thousandths of a second, and in that tiny fraction of a blink of an eye, if the racket is traveling forwards, which is what this diagram is showing here, the green arrow is the direction of the energy of the racket, and if the racket is traveling forwards and the strings are facing forwards, then the ball is going to go forwards without any significant spin. It's just going to be a flat drive. On the other hand, if the racket accelerates from below the point of contact and is actively traveling upwards at the instant the ball touches the strings and then travels past the back of the ball, that will roll the ball end over end towards its target. So now, green arrow, racket's energy is traveling in this direction as contact is made. The racket strings are facing forwards, so the ball is still going to go forwards, but now it's going to have rotation end over end towards its target. That is topspin. That will curve the ball down into the court and keep your shot from traveling too far. And again, this is completely independent of grip. Just because you have an extreme grip does not mean that you're going to be hitting the ball with your racket traveling upwards. I've worked with countless players that have super far grips because they kept turning it further and further and further in an effort to make topspin, but they just keep swinging forwards and forwards and forwards, and so they keep driving the ball and spraying it and making too many mistakes. Here's what it looks like when somebody hits a pretty flat forehand. Del Potro is making contact with this forehand right here at this point, and if I go back in time a little bit, I want you to notice how his racket at the lowest point has not dropped very far below the point of contact. And like his roller coaster wasn't super aggressive as he dropped the racket, and it only dropped to this point right here. If we connect those lines, you can see there's a little bit of low to high path, but most of his energy, the vast majority of the acceleration, is traveling forwards into the point of contact. So that's going to create a shot that has a tremendous amount of power and force, but with very little rotation, and it's not going to curve the ball very much. Just to be clear, that's not wrong. You need to be able to hit penetrating forehands sometimes, and other times, in a more neutral or a more defensive situation, you need to be able to hit with more curve. It's all about matching up the different deliveries with the different situations and circumstances you find yourself in on the court. Now, here's somebody who hits with lots of topspin. We'll do that same treatment here. Here's the point of contact. Then we'll go back in time a little bit and look at the lowest part of the racket before it starts to pull upwards towards the point of contact. And so the middle of his strings down at the bottom is here. And if we connect those lines, you'll see a much, much more vertical path of the racket. And that's ultimately what creates that forward spin. It's the strike of the ball with vertical acceleration occurring as the strike happens that ultimately causes the ball to roll forwards. Most professional tennis players, when they hit their average forehand, evenly split the direction of their energy between forward and upward. Here's what I mean by that. We'll do this same experiment here. There's the point of contact, and now we'll go back to the lowest point of the swing before it starts coming up towards the ball. That's right about here. So I'll draw that line and then go up through the point of contact, and you can see a gentle slope here, but definitely much more of a vertical swing than Del Potro. but not as vertical as somebody like Rafael Nadal. So this is going to give us a nice, even distribution of energy between going upwards, which is what creates the spin or the curve on the ball, and forwards, which is what gives us the penetration or the power that the ball has, which will send the ball through the courts. If you can balance those two forces, then you'll have the best of both worlds. Put everything into action that you just learned, and I promise you'll be hitting your best forehands ever in no time. And if you'd like to take a deep dive into hitting your biggest, most powerful forehands ever, make sure to go to forehandpower.com. I'll put a link to that in the first comment down below as well. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.